It's a privilege and honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrayl Abel now entering the sanctuary. I now like to present one of the sons of Yisrayl Abel, Yahshua Aaron Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The title of my speech today is Love Your Neighbor as Yourself. Now, today we're going to look at positive law number 206. Please turn with me to Leviticus 19, verse 18, and it's on page 98. Leviticus 19, verse 18. And it says, "Do not seek revenge, nor bear a grudge against one of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor, whether a brother or an enemy, as yourself. I am Yahweh." Now, Yahshua quoted this in Matthew 22, verses 34 through 40, when he was asked, which is the greatest commandment? And he said the greatest is love Yahweh, and the second greatest is love your neighbor. And in the Peaceful Solution Law Commentary, Volume 1, pages 282 through 283, it gives us the definitions for the words as, yourself, and neighbor. And I'm going to read a passage out of here. It says, "What each person in the world needs right now and what is most lacking is a perfect guide for human behavior. We need first and foremost to know how to properly conduct ourselves with our fellow man. We need to learn how to love ourselves as well as others. We need to respect and guard the rights and property of others. We must become a perfect friend." Now, just think of how different the world would be if they followed this law. We must all realize that we should all be seeking to serve Yahweh, and we must think of each other in that way. This is what this law teaches. Now, let's look at the definitions here for the word as. And the word as means to the same extent, to the same degree, equally, in the same manner, in the same way that. Now, in the definition of the word yourself, we see it's used as an indication of one's real, normal, or healthy identity or condition, to indicate a normal or proper state. So when the law tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves, we are being commanded to make a conscious and rational decision to look upon every man, woman, and child in the world as being like us, but with their own unique identity. So now that we know who we are to love, and that as yourself means the same as or equal to yourself, let's look at an example of someone who kept this law in the scriptures. Now, David set a great example for us in 1 Samuel when King Saul had tried to kill David several times, but each time Yahweh delivered David from his hands. And when David was presented with the opportunity to kill King Saul, he didn't kill King Saul because he had that love for his enemy. So turn with me to 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel 26, 7 through 12 on page 246. So I'm going to start at verse 7. It says, "So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there Shaul lay, sleeping inside the camp with his spear stuck in the ground by his head. Abner and the men were lying around him. Abishai said to David, 'Yahweh has delivered your enemy into your hands this day. Let me strike him once and pin him to the ground. I will not have to strike him a second time." But David said to Abishai, "Do not destroy him. Who can lay a hand on Yahweh's anointed and remain guiltless?" So right here you can see the love that David had for him, even though he had tried to kill, that Shaul had tried to kill him. So in verse 10, David added, "As surely as Yahweh lives, Yahweh himself shall strike him. Either his day of death will come, or he will go out into battle and be killed. But Yahweh forbid that I should lay a hand upon Yahweh's anointed. Now take the spear and jug of water by his head, and let us go." So David took the spear and the jug of water by Shaul's head, and they left. No one saw nor knew about it, nor did anyone awake. They were all asleep, because a deep sleep from Yahweh had fallen upon them. Now, you would not see this love in the world that David showed for his enemy. Now, even though Shaul tried to kill David, David forgave him. And you don't have to turn there, but for your notes, please write down Matthew 18, verse 21 through 22, and I'm going to read that quick. It says, "Then Kepha came to him and asked, 'Teacher, how often?' Yahshua said to him, 'I do not say to you for 7 times, but for 70 times 7. So Yahshua even said, "Forgive him." And that's part of keeping this law. Now, instead of seeing this love in the world, this is what we see instead.
He needs us to work with him. He's asking for us to work with him. Now, I'm only going to give you a little bit of a nibble because my time's about up. I'm going to give you just a tiny little nibble here because here's the gematria of that verse, those two verses that we just read. The number up here is too high, so it's not in Strong's, but the first numbers, I'm just going to give you this. 7656. 7656. Remember, the ruler needs us. 7656 in the Hebrew, it means Sheba, an oath. 7. From 7651. Seventh. The seventh work. The seventh work. Do you understand that? He needs us. The seventh work. Untie the colt. Untie the colt. What more could that mean? Well, you'll just have to stay tuned. Unleash the colt. You are the colt of the donkey. You are the donkey's colt. And Yahshua needs each and every one of you. Don't leave this house. You have job security forever. Remember what the great deacon just brought out. Man, we got so much riches here. Man, we should be leaping for joy. But stay tuned. There's much more on this. And if you'd all please stand, it's been my honor and privilege to speak to you. And I'd like to turn it over now to one of Yahweh's great priests, the great Kohan, Yahshua Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. All right, today we're going to try to get into a little bit more discussion about what pastors brought out to us about Yahweh's breeding program. I'm going to try to give a little bit more detail about it and how breeding actually works and how Yahweh actually used this from the ancient times to bring us to the point to where we're at right now. In the first book of Israel, on page 155, Pastor starts off by saying, I have always said to you that experience is a teacher. It is a teacher. But not as a great teacher as reading and believing. So it's not as great as actually believing and reading. And that's one thing we try to get across to the children. They don't have to experience the world. They don't have to experience what this world's offering or what sin causes. We were brought here as examples for them. The prophets, the apostles, the testimonies we have written in the book of Yahweh was giving as a testimony to us where we could look at it and we can actually believe that took place because of this choice, this poor decision. The consequence or the reward came from making this positive decision. I have seen farmers go broke trying to experiment themselves. The government has spent billions of dollars experimenting for the farmer, telling him what will work in his area of raising chickens, pigs, cattle, dogs, or whatever. You can get books at the library and read up on anything before you put a chicken on your plate, and you can plan and know exactly what you need to do to keep that chicken healthy. All right, so it starts with a plan. In the beginning, Yahweh had a plan. What was that plan? Right? It was a breeding program. He had a program established where he was going to use certain aspects, certain traits that he wanted inside of a family unit, that he could allow that family unit to build and grow together to, in these last days, to where it becomes a holy priesthood in the greatest time of sin ever. That's the greatest work that has ever been accomplished on the face of this earth. And that was in Yahweh's plan from the beginning. Pastor says it's a little different now than when I was a child and keeping chickens or dogs or anything else healthy because of the environment. So here we start to see Pastor goes into what affects genetics. Okay, breeding, making sure you put in the proper genetics that you're looking for, the character traits or those specific traits you're looking to bring out in either animals or what you're trying to produce as far as looking for a quality in a working product, or what you're trying to accomplish, what your end goal is. But the environment causes a difference. The environment affects this. And we're going to get into how the environment affects us and all those around us. He says, the earth is defiled right now. No matter where you raise puppies, they will either get distemper or hookworm. All right, and that's just not it. They'll get everything. All right, if you don't know what you're doing, these animals will come down with every disease possible that mankind has brought upon themselves. He says, this shows you how that is spreading. He said, in the late 70s, I saw money in raising dogs, and I wanted the best breed, and I wanted them to do what I wanted them to do perfectly. I studied to bring the breeding program about. That's where it starts. Yahweh just didn't decide, hey, I want a family, let's throw these people together and see what we get in the end. No, he studied. He educated himself. He made sure that what he was putting inside the bloodline was going to be 100% successful. But even with that, Yahweh knows we still have to make choices. How did he know Yahshua Messiah was going to choose to do his job? How did he know Yisrael Hawkins was going to choose to do his job? He gave them the perfect breeding. He gave them everything they needed in order to accomplish the goal that he had set before them. And then he gave them the perfect environment to nourish them, to bring them up, and to train them how to make the proper choice. That's how Yahweh brought forth this plan in these last days. Pastor said, I had established and I wanted certain long ball in the mouth. We're talking about the dogs that he was breeding. He said, when I would get on the trail. He said, and then I wanted one to chop at the tree. So he's talking about all the different characteristics he wanted from his animals. And these can be bred. You know, it takes generations of actually putting effort into it. But you can actually get the ultimate result. If you know what you're doing, if you study and you try to protect that bloodline, you can create the perfect hunting dog, the perfect guard dog, the perfect whatever you're looking for, the perfect cow, all right, that brings forth the perfect amount of meat, the perfect chickens. You can create all these things as long as you do it according to what Yahweh originally established for that animal to be. You can never improve upon what Yahweh created. You can only return it back to its original state and use what Yahweh gave us according to the laws of Yahweh to actually bring it forth, and to actually make it into what Yahweh intended it to be created, which is just like us. We were brought into Yahweh's house to be made into Yahweh's image, to be created, guided, instructed, to become just like Yahweh himself. And that's why we're brought here. He says you can breed a dog to a point at a bird. That's what they're supposed to do. If you get that breeding wrong, he won't go in and try to grab the bird. All right. So if you try, if you go wrong with breeding, there's going to be things. The dogs are going to make mistakes. All right. If the breeding is done properly, especially in dogs, if you breed dogs properly, it takes very little training to actually get that dog to do what's needed to do because it's there genetically. You just have to guide the dog along and show them how to actually do it. The environment is going to change everything as far as what the final outcome of that dog is. Each and every one of us were bred, just like Yahshua Messiah and just like Yisrael Hawkins, to be here in these last days. Before Yahweh even established the earth, he had the plan for us to be here doing this job at this time. He's given us the perfect environment at Abel to bring us to where we need to be. And when I say perfect, I don't mean easy. All right, a lot of people think, well, perfect, man, it should be paradise here. We shouldn't be getting tested. Yahweh says we have to be tested. Pastor, I can guarantee you when he was using those dogs, when he was breeding and training those dogs, you have to test them. At 7 weeks old, you can test a dog and see what it's going to be for the rest of its life. If it shows it can't do the job, it will never be able to do the job. Yahweh's testing us right now to see if we can do the job that he's calling us to do, because if we prove we can't do it now, we're not going to do it then. Yahweh will not allow this type of behavior. He won't allow this type of disunity, arguing, bickering, fighting amongst ourselves. He won't allow sin, jealousy into his kingdom. It will be removed, and we'll be removed with it if we partake in it. Right, on page 118 in the book of Israel, for the first book of Israel, if you want to study the breeding program, Pastor really covers a lot inside of it. And to actually understand how breeding works, it's a tremendous way to actually understand how Yahweh patterns everything in his kingdom. Here on page 118, he says, the sons of Leah, that was the firstborn Reuben, that was Jacob, said he was telling what was going to take place. So this is in Genesis chapter 49. If you remember, the children of Israel were being told what the character traits were going to be in the last days. The things that they had done, the things that they had caused, and what they had brought forth upon mankind. Well, this was Reuben. All right. If you don't remember what Reuben did, he defiled his father's bed. That's what he did. Turn back to Genesis 49 and get this in your mind. This is how it occurred. Then he said this in Genesis chapter 49 and verse 4, turbulent like water, you will no longer excel because you did this. All right, there's a consequence to the action. There was a consequence there because he chose. He chose to commit sin. A mistake repeated multiple times is no longer a mistake. It's a choice. It's a decision. And we have to come to understand that. We're setting ourselves up for success, or we're setting ourselves up for failure because of the choices we make. It's each and every one of us. He says he had the same breeding, speaking of Reuben, along with all of his brothers. Because of this one sin right here, he opened up something in his mind. The sin he committed defiled his mind to where now there was confusion there. Inside breeding programs, there's dominant genes and there's recessive genes. Right? There's certain character traits, there's certain degenerative diseases that come out through these traits. You can start to adjust breeding programs to remove those from the bloodlines. But if you're not careful, you could actually damage the bloodlines. And that's where Yahweh knew exactly what it was doing. Because although you might be trying to bring forth some very dominant character traits from, if you're trying to breed a dog and you're trying to breed certain character traits from that dog, you have to be mindful of what's the dominant traits also. What is it that's inside that dog that's hidden? You can't see back 2 and 3 generations in the past unless you know what was inside that bloodline. And that will affect what that dog will become, and it will affect what the dog produces. The same way Yahweh did with us. He knew us, He brought us, He guided us to the point to where He could give us an environment that would nourish us, that would help us, that would show us and teach us what we could become. Outside of that, our genetics weren't here. All right? When we're actually called, there's actually genetics. All right? There's light switches that kick on. All right? When we're actually called, when we first heard the message of Yahweh, there's dominant genes, there's recessive genes, and those recessive genes are there. All right? If my parent had a recessive gene and my mother had a recessive gene, my father had a recessive gene, when that comes into children, there's a probability that that gene will become dominant. But the environment can affect what the outcome of those genetics are. Now, if I'm put into the right atmosphere, such as our young children in Yahweh's house, and they have a structured lifestyle that's been given to them, they will become successful at whatever Yahweh called them to do, because genetically it's in them. If we take them out of that structured environment, if we allow them to be influenced by the world, they will fail. We as ourselves will also fail. Because although Yahweh gave us everything we needed in His house right now to succeed, the choices we make will be the decision on the final outcome of where we're at in Yahweh's kingdom. We can choose to be a part of this work and bring forth this body, preparing for the 2 billion that are coming. And we need to remember, we're not just preparing for 2 billion people that are coming. That's not the end of our work. We have an entire universe that Yahweh has to trust that He can send us out to and do the job. Right? If Yahweh just planned for Yahshua Messiah to be born and that was it, He never planned after that, His plan would have failed. He plans in advance. Just like in chess, you play one piece ahead, you're going to lose. You have to plan in advance. You have to know what's the next step. What's this going to lead to? What's this chain reaction? What's the ripple effect of this person's behavior going to cause? You have to understand it, and you have to know what those choices bring. Choices that were made that we can see that brought strife. All right, that's one thing that Reuben was told. This is going to bring continual strife. All right, Cain was told this is going to bring continual war. This is what your behavior has caused. Yahweh knew what it was going to bring because it was in the genetics, the things that were decided, the decisions that were made, the things that were put into the bloodlines, brought them to the point to where they could not bring forth peace. All right, in Isaiah chapter 11, verses 1 through 5. We're not going to turn there, we're running short on time, but if you remember, this is speaking of Yahshua Messiah, the root and the offspring of David, and the branch. Okay? Remember, what's the one main thing Pastor said? When he taught us how to study, this right here is the actual chapter and verses he taught us how to study by. He said you have to look at it and you have to figure out what is the subject. All right? What's the subject? What's the subject of Isaiah chapter 11? The branch. All right? There were character traits written in Isaiah chapter 11 speaking of both the root and the branch. Speaking of how they would do their jobs and the things that they would be able to do their jobs with. Yahweh said they'd be of quick understanding. Quick to understand the laws being taught. Quick to understand the things being given by the priest. Quick to understand those things. Where was Yahshua Messiah when his parents came looking for him? At the feet of the priest. Studying, teaching, learning. That's where we have to be. That's where our children have to be if we want them to be successful. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 11 through 18, this is the scripture that talks about not being unequally yoked with unbelievers. Not allowing ourselves to be pulled down. Not allowing ourselves to be pulled out of Yahweh's work by either those who are not a part of Yahweh's house or those who have left Yahweh's house. We have to guide, guard, and protect each and every one of ourselves against these things. If you have an environment where you're taught to do something, right? Children come to the services, everyone comes to services, this is a structured environment, you learn. Outside of this environment, when we go back home, if we don't continue the same structured environment, it fails. It won't succeed. Whatever's brought here has to be brought home in order for the ultimate breeding program to come about. We have to be on guard, we have to be mindful, we have to prepare consistently, making sure that everything we do is done according to that plan that was shown to us at Yahweh's house. And if you'll please stand, I have the great honor to introduce to you the great Kohan, Yahshua Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may all be seated. In the news today, there's something I want you to keep in mind as we watch this, and I do want to forewarn you that there is a lot of black spots covering the nakedness of the adults that can't seem to manage to dress themselves very well, but you're going to see children for what they are. You're going to see how horrible this system truly is. You're going to see how disgusting Yahweh actually sees not only those who partake of it, but anyone that wants to be involved in that system, and also those who fell from his family in heaven, the courts of heaven. They left him. How disgusting they are, but how much he would they would repent. How much he would that we would repent if we have partaken of the system. And most of us that are older have, and we've came out of this system. We're trying to separate ourselves from this system and touch not the unclean thing. But I want to read you and write this down for your notes. In Psalms 91, this is very important because we know this terror is soon to come upon us. In verse 5 it says, "You will not be afraid of the terror of night, nor by the arrow that flies by day, nor of the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor of the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 will fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you." Once again, there's a contingency with this. "Only with your eyes you will look, and you will see the reward of the wicked. But because you have made Yahweh your refuge," or because you have made the house of Yahweh your refuge, because you have made the Most High your house, the house of Yahweh, no evil will befall you, nor will any plague come near your dwelling. And remember, we keep pushing and pressing what Moshe brought in Deuteronomy about how if we choose life, even our children will live. If we'll teach them, if we'll train up a child, as King Solomon said, in the way it must go, it will live. It will choose righteousness. But that's us as teachers, as leaders, as instructors. We're teaching no matter what we do. And when you look at that tree of righteousness, a young man asked last week, and he said, "Kohan, you know, when we look at the beaches, they're so beautiful." And they are. But it's the uncleanness that mankind has put on them that has made them disgusting. It's not the beach itself that's sin. It's the disgust, the filth that Yahweh said to take care of in a proper way that they didn't do. It's the uncleanness that's being spread off of bodies that are not adhering to the law of Yahweh that is bringing forth this death. And as we go through this, because truly this other system, there is death everywhere. You're going to see, we need to pray for our brothers that are in that fourth part of the earth, in Africa, in Europe, in the Middle East, because there's death everywhere over there. They're seeing it. They're watching children starve to death. And pay attention when they show this in the news. You'll hear them say a large number of people that have died, and half of them are children. Why? Don't fool yourselves. People are being killed off. There's a depopulation taking place. So why just kill the children? Well, get rid of that generation. The adults are killing themselves. They're full of disease. If you can stop that new generation, you can get rid of everything. Just have some patience, and you'll kill off a lot of people. Well, we're going to see that in the news, and we even have President Duarte, which is where we start off in the Philippines, and he's trying to push drugs out of his country. And, of course, he stood against the Catholic Church and talked about this tribute, that they come and take this money, and he's trying to stand for something positive with getting the drugs out, but he doesn't really know how to do it. We can help him. Killing everyone is not going to solve the problem. We have to educate them and start seeing where we fit into these things. People in Afghanistan saying that they're being bombed. No soldiers around, just the citizens being bombed. Killings in Nigeria, even in the churches. Yes, even in Nigeria, they're going in and killing each other. Car bombings, suicide bombings, outside of police stations, in the grocery stores. All of these things taking place. And then children starving to death. And governments, remember, NATO is the army of the Vatican, the Catholic Church. Pay close attention to when you hear the lady's going to say who's responsible for this starvation going on and who's prohibiting the food from coming in. Of course, it's the beast and the one given authority from that beast, as Revelation 6 says, and you'll hear it. Listen for it, because it's there. And then in Charlottesville, I want to read you something else. This was in Virginia this last week, but I want to read you something that Pastor wrote. This is Unveiling Satan, page 120. And it says, "And if you consider the word slave a dirty word, it's because you don't know what Yahweh teaches concerning the subject. Yahweh's slavery law is the most beautiful law in all the Holy Scriptures. It is the most unselfish and uncaring of all of Yahweh's 613 laws. It is the most hated by this world." Now, when you see what we see in Charlottesville, of course, white supremacy and neo-Nazism, that's the other system. You're seeing that part of that system that looks so beautiful, that tree that looks so desirable. Well, you're seeing the inner guts of it with the death and destruction, to where a man actually takes a car and runs it 30 miles an hour into a group of people, and if that's not enough, then he backs out over more people. And then we see this taking place all around the world. In Barcelona, Spain, a van literally goes up on the sidewalk hitting people. And the ironic thing about this, they say the man in Virginia was going about 30 miles an hour. They say the man in Barcelona was going like 85 to 90 miles an hour hitting people. Just hitting people. Now, they want to blame the Muslims for this, but it wasn't a Muslim that did it in Virginia. It's a system. And everyone that's not part of this tree is part of that system. We have to come out from that system. Death, disease, these children dying, flesh rotting, that is truly what is part of that other tree. You can put all the sauce you want on a pig. You can soak it in salt water if you want to. It will still kill you. If you go out into this other system and partake of that, it will kill you. Yahweh has said, dying you will die. So please watch this, and when those little children come up, don't turn your heads. Watch it. See it. Realize this is the reward of the wicked, and those children do not deserve what they're suffering. If we could go ahead and play the news.
They have to stop because the alternative are either jail or hell. there is 3 million, there's a 3 million drug addicts. I'd be happy to slaughter them. 3 million drug addicts. I'd be happy to slaughter them. We will not stop until the last drug lord have surrendered or put behind bars or below the ground if they so wish. I will not allow these idiots to run the show. Not during my watch. They are obstructing justice, shoot them para makita talaga yung anong klaseng human rights.
Locals in Afghanistan's Nangarhar province claim a U.S. airstrike hit a civilian vehicle and there were no terrorists anywhere near the vicinity. Here are some of the resident stories.
Yesterday, they dropped a bomb on a Suzuki vehicle, killing civilians. Not a single terrorist is being targeted. The foreigners just strike civilians. The strike was conducted in the middle of open terrain. There was zero chance of civilian casualties.
One person lost 5 children. But now they bluntly deny that they bombed these civilians. They didn't kill a single Taliban or ISIL fighter. They killed only innocent civilians, women and children.
We can't accept the cruel attacks against our people anymore. We urge the government of Afghanistan to prevent such brutal acts. We were optimistic that they would clear our areas of militants, but these military operations are just a show. They just fire a few missiles, target civilians, then return without any result.
At least 11 people have been killed after an attack at a church in southeast Nigeria. Eyewitnesses say at least one gunman opened fire on worshippers in St. Philip's Church in Ozubulu near the city of Onitsha. The incident took place in the early hours of Sunday morning. Several other worshippers were wounded during the attack. Police blamed the violence on a feud between 2 individuals from the community. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari condemned the attack, describing the incident as an appalling crime against humanity. Authorities have vowed to bring the perpetrators of the attack to justice.
After the recitation of the I believe in one God, we are about to introduce the prayer of the faithful. And the whole problem began. Just a boy, a man wearing black polo came inside the church and started shooting recklessly. And that kind of thing. There was confusion. And after looking at the problem, there's nothing one can do except to begin to escape. So after the first round, there was second round. And I guess it was during that second round some people were shot. Some people were shot dead.
27 people have died after a female suicide bomber blew herself up at a market in northeastern Nigeria. 2 other suicide bombers detonated their devices outside a nearby refugee camp, wounding dozens of people. The 3 explosions took place near the city of Maiduguri, the epicenter of the 8-year-long conflict between the Nigerian government and Islamist militants Boko Haram. In total, some 83 people were wounded. Government forces retook large swathes of territory from Boko Haram last year, but the militants have struck back, killing at least 170 people since June. Islamist insurgency has killed 20,000 people and forced some 2.7 million to flee their homes in the last 8 years.
car bomb blast near a police station in Somalia's capital has killed at least 5 people and wounded at least 13 others. According to security officials, the Sunday blast near Waberi police station along the busy Makkah al-Mukarramah road may have involved a suicide bomber. The explosion shattered a month of relative calm in Mogadishu, often a target of the extremist group Al-Shabaab. Let's get more now from CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello. We can cross over to Mogadishu for that. Abdulaziz, the Somali capital has once again come under attack. What more can you tell us about Sunday's blast, though?
The attack happened at exactly 11 a.m. local time here. Now, the information that we've received from authorities so far is that 5 people have been confirmed dead, all of them civilians, but that number is set to rise owing to the nature of the injuries. Now, exactly what happened is at around 11 a.m., that's quite a busy time here in Mogadishu, and the road that the explosion happened is called Makkah al-Mukarramah. It's quite busy at that given time, and as traffic was slowly building up, a suicide bomber tried to pass through a security checkpoint there near a police station and a security checkpoint, but unfortunately he detonated the vehicle there, killing 5 people, most of them civilians, and the explosion happened outside a popular supermarket that's also in close proximity to a police station that came under attack last month that left at least 10 people dead. Now the death toll is expected to rise owing to the number of injuries so far, but on the other end, the militant group that's known to stage such similar attacks in the past hasn't yet claimed responsibility. Websites, it's saying that the attack was meant to target security forces who are cordoning off a particular section of the road there. And as you've said, Beatrice, it puts to an end more than a month of relative stability that was slowly coming back here to Mogadishu and beyond, owing to the efforts by a Mogadishu stabilization force that was set up by the president in March. That stabilization force comprises of the police, the tactical unit and the military, and it has proved very, very effective in controlling and cordoning off key roads from and preventing Al-Shabaab attacks. And earlier last month there were 2 mini trucks that were seized on outside Mogadishu. If these vehicles had managed to come into the city, the death toll would have been higher. So for now, we are keeping tabs on this story as it's developing, and we will update our viewers on more.
Most of us living in the West have never known hunger. In America, food shelves are easily accessed by the most vulnerable of our society. Now, despite living in a time where there's a global surplus of food, millions of people around the world are still suffering from famine. And if you follow the mainstream media coverage about these humanitarian disasters, they're most likely presented through the lens of climate change, high food prices, and taxes. They're most likely presented through the lens of climate change, high food prices, and taxes. But in places like Yemen, South Sudan, and Somalia, where images of skeletal children have become commonplace in several countries across Africa and the Middle East, it is perhaps no coincidence that the epidemic of famine is directly linked to modern-day colonialism and imperialism, led of course by the United States and NATO. Led of course by the United States and NATO. Led of course by the United States and NATO. It is in this part of the world where resource exploitation, the war on terror, military occupation, and destabilization intersect to create one of the most dire humanitarian crises of the modern era. While environmental factors do play a role, policies set by the world's most powerful oil companies, and state actors have created and reinforced the present. For example, where the U.S. has been waging a covert drone war, people have become accustomed to famine. In a span of just 1 year, between 2011 and 2012, over 260,000 people died. Over 260,000 people died, half of them under the age of 5. Marking the worst famine in the last 25 years. Now, according to data from Somalia's Food Security and Nutrition Analysis Unit, 4.6% of the total population and 10% of children under 5 died in southern and central Somalia alone during this time period. Now, the organization also found that the result was widespread livestock deaths, the smallest cereal harvest since the 1991 to 1994 Civil War. Compounding environmental burdens were the wider impacts of British colonialism in Somalia, as well as U.S. militarism. While the U.S. plundered Somalia for resources by way of mineral excavation and so-called oil exploration by companies like ExxonMobil, past and present administrations have also applied their full military might. Now in South Sudan, a small statelet less than a decade old and home to some of Africa's largest oil reserves, and home to some of Africa's largest oil reserves, and home to some of Africa's largest oil reserves, nearly 2 million people are on the brink of starvation today. South Sudan has found itself in a situation that the UN describes as catastrophic, predicting that half the population will be facing food shortages by the end of this year. Further exacerbating the situation is the mark left behind by the U.S. military, which has poured billions into the country by way of weaponry, plunging the nation into chaos in order to turn it into another colonial outpost. While war ravaged South Sudan, oil companies like Oranto, Petroleum, and Exxon were busy exploiting resources, setting up oil and gas deals worth billions of dollars, while nearly half the population was starving. Mothers unable to feed their starving children, while the shadowy European corporation Swiss Finance Luxembourg AG just announcing an $11 billion deal that is set to rise to $105 billion. A nation carved out of a unified Sudan with help from the US, UK, France, Israel, and other NATO states, South Sudan plays an essential role in hosting economic arrangements to the benefit of strategic U.S. empire interests in the region, with its large reserves of gold, construction materials, and crude petroleum. While creating a state of affairs that reinforces hunger, the U.S. and its allies are finding new ways to exploit the most vulnerable and keep them divided through means of war and weapons imports. Now, Yemen is also being forced to endure the chilling effects of famine, thanks to a U.S.-backed bombing campaign by Saudi Arabia and a well-armed coalition supported by both the Obama and Trump administrations. After years of indiscriminate bombing campaigns and port blockades, millions of starving Yemenis are now also dealing with cholera, while the number of cases are set to hit 150,000 in the next 6 months due to a lack of medicine, a preventable epidemic that is the largest case seen in modern history. The largest case seen in modern history.
Virginia's governor declared a state of emergency in Charlottesville today as white nationalists clashed in the streets with counter-protesters. Groups including the Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazis came from across the country to rally against plans to remove a Confederate statue from a park. The violence included an apparent attack of peaceful protest streets with counter-protesters. Groups including the Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazis came from across the country to rally against plans to remove a Confederate statue from a park. The violence included an apparent attack with a car on a crowd of peaceful protesters. At least one person was killed. This all took place a short distance from the University of Virginia, which was founded by Thomas Jefferson. President Trump addressed the crisis from his golf club in New Jersey.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides.
Paula Reed has the latest now from Charlottesville, and we caution you, some of the video is graphic.
One person is dead and 19 injured after a speeding vehicle drove into a group of protesters marching peacefully through downtown Charlottesville.
Your impression that this was deliberate, or did the person seem
100%. There's absolutely no way. He was going so fast it flew people like 10 feet and nailed those two cars forward.
This comes after a day of clashes between alt-right protesters and counter-demonstrators earlier this morning. For over an hour, demonstrators dispensed tear gas and threw water bottles with little interference from police. The rally was shut down after the governor declared a state of emergency.
This event has been declared an unlawful assembly.
Police in tactical gear ordered protesters to leave the park. Controversial right-wing blogger Jason Kessler planned what he called a pro-white rally here to protest Charlottesville's effort to remove a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee from a city park. Friday night, fights broke out and police had to be called after alt-right protesters marched through the University of Virginia campus swinging torches. Charlottesville Mayor Mike Signer said they were ready for the protesters.
There are tons of outsiders coming here who've traveled all across the country to try and make Charlottesville a target for their ideology.
In July, about 36 Klan members came to the city to demonstrate. Mayor Signer says the actions of a few will not stop his city from moving forward.
We've taken on the right work here in this historic city. I refuse to be intimidated by somebody who thinks we can stop that work. We can stop changing the narrative just because I'm going to shout and yell and send you a bunch of nasty tweets and open carry in your public parks.
There have been police helicopters flying over the protests all day today. Late this afternoon, a state police helicopter crashed, killing both people on board. bringing the total fatalities to 3.
Carrying torches and swastikas on banners, the Unite the Right marchers chanted slogans drawn from Nazi ideology like blood and soil and clashed with counter-protesters. Blood would be spilled at a counter-rally the next day after a car plowed into the crowd and killed 32-year-old Heather Heyer and wounded 19 others. Many prominent Republicans called for the car attack to be labeled domestic terrorism.
What we saw when that young man drove the car into a crowd of people, that was domestic terrorism. That was grotesque.
Black belt every day!
President Trump chose to insist over several days that there was a moral equivalency between the white supremacist demonstrators and the counter-demonstrators.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either.
David Duke, the former head of the Ku Klux Klan, tweeted his thanks. Early in his candidacy, Trump made it clear he wouldn't watch his words.
I think the big problem this country has is being politically correct. I've been challenged by so many people, and I don't frankly have time for total political correctness. And to be honest with you, this country doesn't have time either.
He denied that he mocked a New York Times reporter's disability.
Written by a nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said.
President Trump's lack of clear condemnation has left many wondering why, when he's so quick to mock, insult, or label, he couldn't do it this time with neo-Nazis. It's plunging his administration into free fall. So many executives resigned from his economic advisory and manufacturing councils that the president disbanded them. Top leaders in his own party and the U.S. military chose a side this week against Trump and his moral ambiguity, leaving the president increasingly isolated.
The tensions at the center of the violence in Charlottesville are an issue in cities across the country. DeMarco Morgan has more on that.
Protesters toppled to this statue of a Confederate soldier last night in Durham, North Carolina. Following last weekend's violence in Charlottesville, officials across the country are taking a hard look at rallies being planned in their cities by white supremacist groups.
Boston does not want you here. Boston rejects your message.
Boston Mayor Marty Walsh is speaking out against a so-called free speech rally this Saturday that white supremacist demonstrators are planning to attend.
We are a city that believes in free speech, but we will not tolerate sentiments to violence. We will not tolerate threatening behavior. We will not have it.
The images are graphic. A terrorist in a van mowed down pedestrians today for 7 city blocks in a popular tourist area of Barcelona, Spain. At least 13 were killed, more than 100 others injured. 2 suspects are under arrest, but the driver got away. Deborah Pata is in Barcelona.
People ran for their lives, screaming as the attacker, driving a white van, jumped the sidewalk and plowed into a crowd of tourists and locals. In his wake, bodies strewn across the pavement like broken dolls. Witnesses said he was weaving in and out, aiming for people as they desperately tried to get out of the way. He drove 7 blocks before abandoning the vehicle. A passerby frantically tried to give CPR to an injured man. An American tourist who had just arrived at the popular site said the attacker was driving erratically.
I heard this just group of people scream. Then I looked to my left and I saw a white van. It looked to be as if he was going left to right, hitting people with the little stands where people were shopping.
Cobb Oxford from South Carolina also witnessed the attack.
Best wagon described as all hell breaks loose. Best wagon described as all hell breaks loose. Best wagon described as all hell breaks loose. I saw a car bumper laying in the middle of the sidewalk and people scattering in all different directions. I counted 6 or 8 bodies within a block and a half.
Police arrived quickly, sealing off the area and ushering people to safety as they went door to door searching for the gunmen. Stores and subway stations were shut down. It's the latest in a string of attacks in Europe where vehicles are the weapon. Last summer in Nice, France, 86 people were killed when a man drove a truck through crowds gathered to celebrate Bastille Day. In December, a truck was driven into a crowded Christmas market in Berlin. And in the UK this spring, vehicles were used in attacks at Westminster, London Bridge and Finsbury Park. Tonight, everything is shut down here in the center of Barcelona, in what's normally a very festive part of the city. 2 arrests have already been made, but police have categorically stated that they were not driving the van that mowed into pedestrians earlier on today. That person, the driver of the vehicle, is still on the run.
Authorities say terrorists who attacked 2 cities in Spain yesterday apparently were planning a larger, more sophisticated assault. At least 14 people, including 1 American, were killed and more than 130 injured. Investigators are trying to determine whether the driver of a van that ran down pedestrians on the crowded sidewalks of Barcelona was among a group of terrorists killed hours later in a separate attack. ISIS has claimed responsibility. Seth Doan begins our coverage.
More arrests were made today to jeers from onlookers. In all, 4 suspects have been detained following the twin vehicle attacks. One down a busy Barcelona street, the second 75 miles south in the beach town of Cambrils. This police document reveals the young faces of those believed to be behind these attacks and on the run. One is just 17 years old.
Sources tell CBS News that the terrorists were planning a larger attack, possibly a vehicle bomb using gas canisters, all being constructed in a house just down the street. The house exploded Wednesday.
It was leveled, and the explosions were so strong, this neighbor showed us how it broke the glass in her window. Spanish police theorize that after the explosives prematurely ignited, the terrorists then went to Plan B. The next day, a van was driven down the tourist-packed Las Ramblas in Barcelona, swerving to hit as many people as possible. And 8 hours later, terrorists in another car in Cambrils rammed into more pedestrians. 1 woman died in the attack.
He was just going up and down the street, like ranting, raving.
Fitzroy Davies was at a nearby bar and took this cell phone video when he saw one of the 5 terrorists taunting officers.
I thought I was watching a film, one of them horror films.
Good evening, friends. We start tonight with the president facing a backlash far more serious than anything ever seen from the Russia investigation. 208 days into his presidency, Trump finds himself on a political island. Business leaders, Wall Street bankers, military leaders, and former presidents are all distancing themselves from the president at a torrid pace after his comments on the violence in Charlottesville. Under Armour's Kevin Plank, Kenneth Frazier of Merck, and Intel's Brian Krzanich left the president's advisory boards on Monday. Now the president has disbanded the Strategy and Policy Forum and the Manufacturing Council. But J.P. Morgan Chase's Jamie Dimon says the Strategy and Policy Forum decided to disband independently of the president after his remarks on Tuesday. The Bush presidents have released a joint statement condemning the Charlottesville hatred, showing the concern over the future of the Republican Party and the image of America to the rest of the world. This is leadership and involvement by the Bush presidents that we have not seen since them leaving office. Countries may hesitate to align with the United States after Trump demonstrates the hate he accepts. For more on this, we turn to Larry Cohen tonight. He's the chair of Our Revolution, the board chair there. Larry, nice to have you with us tonight. You've been on a lot of boards. You know how presidential councils work, how important they can be. How damaging is this? What kind of trouble is this for the president?
It's big trouble for the president because this is a president who boasts about being a colleague and billionaire to these CEOs who can't run fast enough to get away from him and what he stands for. He is in big trouble, and when you pile up his whole 7 or 8 months, it's not clear how long he'll last.
Well, how does he repair the damage? Can he repair the damage?
I think he cannot repair this damage. The only good side of it is it will have people across the country talking about slavery. It will have people across the country talking about slavery.
Protesters gathered outside Trump Tower in New York in anticipation of the president's arrival. This is the first time the president is in New York since his inauguration. CBS News senior foreign affairs and White House correspondent Margaret Brennan is there.
President Trump is expected to arrive here at his Manhattan home at Trump Tower later this evening for the very first time since his inauguration. And as you can hear, it will not be a warm welcome on the streets of Manhattan. The majority of people, of course, in this city did not vote for him, but you also have a lot of people out here carrying signs and chanting things that have to do with that most immediate controversy regarding his delayed condemnation of the white supremacist groups who staged that rally in Charlottesville over the weekend. A lot of signs and chants here around that theme. But if President Trump was seeking to escape controversy on this vacation, this working vacation as he calls it, he will certainly not get to do that here in Manhattan. He will be here for the next few days, and as you can see, there's a tremendous New York City police presence here. You have dump trucks, sanitation trucks lined up and down Fifth Avenue, blocking it off, creating a barrier between anyone who could drive up or approach, get within a certain proximity of Trump Tower, of course, to ward off any kind of bomb threat, any kind of terror threat. You have vehicles up and down this New York City police, hundreds of protesters throughout the day, but the masses have really been building, of course, at the end of the day as people get off work and come here and are expected to greet him with not a very warm welcome when he arrives here back in Manhattan later this evening.
If everyone will please stand, I want you to pay close attention, and we'll play it next week. But it was said by President Trump, he was referring to a general that some are referring to as a fake story, that to get Muslims under your control who follow a God, the same God, but to get them under your control, you take the bullets and you dip them in pig's blood first. Then you shoot them. Well, ISIS didn't start in the Middle East. It started in Egypt. And to tell you more about how peace will come upon this earth, I'd like to introduce the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kohan Yisrayl Abel Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh. All right. We got a crowd here today. Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. You may be seated. You may be seated. I think they'd be better off to dip them bullets in a little bit of righteousness instead of this pig blood. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I was just given the stuff here to cover during the feast. I don't know how I'm going to cover it between now and the feast, but this is really great stuff. Really, really great. This just shows what Yahweh says is what's going on. 100%. Let's see. Thank you. Yahweh bless you. I got to get this in, they said. The Reach Out program is really going great. The questions that we're getting back is wonderful. The places where we're getting them from is all over the world. India is it's multiplying with audience. And the thank you letters and truth finally being told, as they say. It's I can't read all of it to you. House of Yahweh have applications. Oh, I got to tell you this. Google called me. Yeah, Google called me this week and said, if I could find their words, they actually use, here it is, the, let's see, this ad, they were really astonished about this ad and the thing, the reach out thing. They were impressed because our ad had received more than 500,000 views. Now that's in 30 days. In 30 days. And he said, man, that is phenomenal. And I said, no, that's Yahweh. There's no way I could reach you all of this, but the responses are great. We see that we're reaching the world. China is multiplying, so is India, places that I was wondering if we were ever reaching, but we are. Yahweh is taking this thing to all corners of the world. I want to get into this sermon now, so I'm going to lay this aside. Maybe I'll read it later during the feast, maybe, or something. What is concerning me is that I haven't made it clear enough about this, the two kingdoms that we're, that's at war right now. We can tell from the scriptures, and I get all my information from the scriptures. I get second backups from other places. But I get my information from the scriptures. But these two kingdoms, we can see from the scriptures that Yahweh created everything. Now, there come a time when certain people, certain beings, not human, not mankind, was given offices, and those offices were extreme. They were given to guide the universe. The people, the beings left their first estate. Now, I brought all of that out, but I want to expound on these kingdoms and the wars that's going on right now, because we have Yahweh is saying, you're not capable. He says he stands in the assemblies of the gods, if you can remember that. I brought it out many times. He says, I stand in the assemblies of the gods and I tell you, but you don't act. You don't act on what I'm doing, what I'm telling you. Here's where the trouble is. Meanwhile, habitations are being destroyed. Imagine, too, if you will, that you cannot operate the creation that Yahweh has made. It couldn't be made different, and you enjoy life. Your body, I brought it out, that you're made up of trillions of kingdoms of microorganisms. There's several different kingdoms in your eye. And of course, if we damage those kingdoms, we have trouble seeing. Well, what's going on in heaven is these microorganisms they're being destroyed. And of course, this ruins life. Once this takes place, the microorganisms that feed and nourish and make it so enjoyable for mankind to live, and also the beings in the universe to enjoy life, enjoy a meal. That's what the Sabbath is for. It's so important to be a part of the Sabbath, because Yahweh teaches us to come together and to be friends, not enemies, friends, in unity with Yahweh and in unity with each other. if we come together in the unity of Yahweh's laws, you know, that's real unity, because you got something to go over. Right now, the world is going this way and that way by everyone who has a thought. You saw the automobiles plowing into the crowds. Well, some bishop in Rome says you've got to limit the size of these automobiles. We've got to pass a law, another law. Limit the size of them. Let them be 6-cylinder. No, I don't want a 6-cylinder. I want an 8-cylinder. That's low enough. No, you're going to get a 6-cylinder. I'm going to pull out my gun and shoot you if you don't stop arguing with me. See, this is their attitude, the attitude of force. They don't get anywhere. They're dumb as skunks and don't realize it. And they're arguing back and forth, and they took up the Nimrod system, which was a system of force. Cush taught this system of force, and he said this is the only thing that's going to work, is just to force your way through this, take captive or kill those who disagree. Well, the same thing took place. He got that idea, of course, from Satan, because Satan has the power given by Yahweh to influence. That's all she has the power to do. She has the power over those who choose her now, over Yahweh, but she only has what Yahweh gives her over those that belong to Yahweh. Want to cut Satan off? Repent and be converted. That cuts you off. That cuts you off from Satan. Unless Yahweh gives her special permission to tempt you or to afflict you in some way, like he did Eob. Remember the Eob where Yahweh says, this man is perfect. Look, have you considered him? You know, this man could with his attitude, his character, his knowledge of what is right and wrong, he could teach and guide you and bring you to peace. And Satan says, the only reason he's doing that is you're paying him to do it. You put this shield around him, no one can touch him. You're making him rich, filthy rich. Look at that man. He's got 7,000 camels out there. 7,000, 5,000 donkeys. No, that's oxen. I forgot how many donkeys. 6,000 maybe, 5. But he had a bunch of everything. He was filthy rich, and Yahshua and Yahweh said, okay, then you go ahead and you touch him, but don't take his life. But you take all of this away from him if you want to, and let's see if he's still strong enough to stand. And she did, and Eob came through it in fine flying colors. Now this was a testimony, brethren, in heaven to all the planets there, all the beings there, because we're going to be rulers over, we're going to have that rulership over everything Yahweh has made. And that's what he's training you for. Where does it start? With keeping the Sabbath. Coming and listening, growing from Yahweh's words spoken on his Sabbath day, getting that inspiration that you won't get anywhere else except the house of Yahweh. And you get it 3 times a year at the feast and every 7th day of the week. Now, the last chapter of Isaiah says, from one new moon to another and one feast day to another, all flesh is going to continue this throughout all eternity. What a blessing right there. I had another thought there about the food. I don't want to get onto that, though. But think of the Sabbath day. You're coming together, strangers. Strangers coming in, they know hardly anything about Yahweh's laws, about tolerance, about learning to love someone else with a clean, holy, righteous love, true love, as I call it in the letters, the learning to live together and enjoy life over meals. I guess I'm going to have to say something about them meals. I keep getting back to them. My mouth is watering. we were going to have deer for the community meal. Believe it or not, we got some arguments about that, and I said, I think I made a mistake. I told her, Ezekiel, I think I made a mistake. I think it's going to have to be changed, and let's do the traditional fish. Because I said the reason we was doing that was because Yahshua did it, and we still want to practice that way. So this feast, we were looking for another day to have a second community meal. So since the feast ends on Friday, and we still got the Sabbath, I've got a captive audience, so we're going to have 2 community meals in a row. and what did the people at Yahshua, when he fed the 5,000 and 7,000, what was it they said he paid per meal, collected per meal there? What? Nothing? What? He didn't charge for those meals? Praise Yahweh. Isn't that a blessing? Well, it doesn't occur anywhere except the House of Yahweh. But back to this kingdoms now. I throw you off, I know, but imagine these 2 kingdoms. It's first in Yahweh's hands. But then they started getting out of hand because of it was not unified, and the beings in heaven couldn't stay in unity with Yahweh. Satan didn't pull all the leaders out of heaven, but she pulled a third of them out. Now, I don't know how many billions or trillions there would be, but she's got a lot of workers. The Roman army, now if you picture this, and the same thing that Satan did, when the Pharisees, Sadducees, actually the Herodians did this, and then they pulled the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenes in with them because they had great leadership, and in combining that leadership, they still had 4 religions, but combining the leadership with the army, and this army was a vast army. So you could see they're following the pattern of Satan. So Satan is influencing them to go by force. Satan influenced the kingdoms in heaven, a bunch of them. And when we're talking about this, we're not talking about just a few beings. We're talking about trillions. The next number up, I don't know. You know, all I can think about, the biggest one I can think about is trillions, and it's getting uncountable. And that's what he's saying we're going to become, as the sands of the sea, uncountable, before this thing is over. We're the small tree that's growing strong, and it's growing bigger every day, and soon it will be, as Yahshua said, the largest, most powerful tree in the universe. That's what Yahweh is putting into mankind. But he didn't do this, you know, immediately. He first gave these people, these beings, a chance to rule themselves, and they left their first estate, and they said, this other way is more exciting. Let's go and do this. That same pattern was, and teaching was actually given to Eve in this wonderful garden that Yahweh gave them. And Eve then, Satan convinced Eve and Adam to sin, to start following her way. Now, this was the way that was long taught in heaven. This was the way also that brought destruction to the earth to begin with, as we see in Genesis 1 and 2. That was the first flood. It got so violent and so idolatrated, so filthy, that the microorganisms could not do their job, and the heavens collapsed and brought the first flood. Yahweh went to work again, set the earth back in order, and then he introduced to the heavens Adam and Eve and a training period. Knowing full well, he knew full well, he was made subject to sin, so he wasn't surprised at all when they chose to be like the gods. Like the gods? I just told you what they're like. Like the gods who left their first estate. This is demonstrated also in Job. They left their first estate, and now Yahweh says they're cut off from the tree of life. They cut themselves off from the tree of life. And this plan he has is a 6,000-year plan, which we're right at the end of that 6,000-year plan. Satan said she was given 10 extra years, and I don't know where that started and stopped. That wasn't shown by the Catholic Church. But the 6,000 years that he gave to mankind to finish, as Daniel said, put an end to sin, stop sin. Daniel 9, the 9th chapter. He said, this amount of time right here that you can check out and follow, because the last part of that is the 3.5 years. The 3.5 years, there's two of them, and we're in between the 2 3.5-year periods. And when we go into this the last 3.5 years, it's going to have to be cut short, Yahweh said, or no flesh, not even the elect, would be saved. But for the elect's sake, which is his kingdom that he is forming, now that kingdom, of course, is to take over the universe. Everything that was given to what the King James Version calls angels, everything that was put under Satan's control, all of these big kingdoms that are out there are going to be put under your leadership. You're the last. You're going to do it. You're going to be the first to do it. Right. Praise Yahweh. In Matthew, let's be turning over to Matthew 21. And Matthew 21, Yahshua shows this. In fact, the prophets show it. It's here and there, scattered here and there throughout the Holy Scriptures. Matthew 21, and look at verse 32. Now he was speaking to the chief priests, 23, to the chief priests, the elders, Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, Herodians, the verse 15, the scribes, that's the scribes also, and the chief priest, and later it shows the Herodians also. But he was speaking to them, and he said, "For Yochanan came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him, but the publicans and the harlots, they believed him. And even after you saw this, you did not repent afterwards, so that you might believe him," that is, believe Yahweh, because the reason he said that, Yahweh had already predicted this in advance, that they would not repent, and Yahshua showed them this and said, but you still, even after seeing that Yahweh's word comes true, his prophecies come true, you still won't believe. Now, then he goes into a parable. He says in verse 33, here another parable. There was a certain householder who planted a vineyard. This is the kingdom of Yahweh. This is what he's pointing out, is these two kingdoms, in fact, and how Satan is making war. She's the adversary, her and her gods, and she's making war to try to stop you. Yes, you. She's trying to stop you from being a part of Yahweh's kingdom. Every one of you here. Satan hates your guts. She would like to rend you like a rag. Forced it, a vineyard, fenced it, dug out a wine press in it, built a tower, and leased out to tenants. Then that was the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians, who were before that called Coptic Catholics, whom Moshe brought out of Egypt, and he even mentions that here over in Yochanan. These are the ones that Moshe brought out of Egypt. They never left their God worship, as Acts and other prophets show. Was it to me? Do you think that I didn't know that you were not offering those sacrifices and offerings to me for 40 years? Do you think I didn't know that you was offering them to your gods? These were those Coptic Catholics that they're now admitting, by the way. The Catholic Church is now admitting it's the seed of Abraham. Praise Yahweh for that. I told it before they did. The seed of Abraham. Okay, when the time came to harvest the grapes, he sent his servants to the tenants that they might receive the fruit of it. But the tenants seized his servants. They beat one, killed another, stoned another. Of course, these, if you can think of the first two priests now, you'll understand what he's saying right here. Abel and Cain. Abel and Cain offered their offerings to Yahweh. Their offerings were people. They were people. Yahweh said to Cain, your offerings are not acceptable. If you would do righteousness, they would be acceptable. If they practice righteousness, you're not practicing righteousness, you're following the gods, Cain. Your way is a way of war, the same thing that destroyed the earth to begin with, that was brought forth by the gods, and now you're being like the gods, by force. When you see the words, make us gods, like in Acts, they're actually saying, make me a god, let me rule. Moshe, make me a god, so I can rule this people. Make us gods and we will rule them. Just let us rule. And they said to Moshe, we're holy, we're all holy. It wasn't like he was saying, make us a carved stick to worship. That's the way the King James Version plants it. We're working on that now to get it straightened out. But that's the difference in it. They weren't saying, make me something that I kneel down to worship, this stick that's got a carved head on it and looks like a man or something. They can't be that stupid. But they were begging to be made rulers. Gods are rulers who lift themselves up over others. They're bullies. That's exactly what they are. They're bullies. Don't take the shape of a god. Don't make yourself a god. Make yourself a servant like Yahshua. This will straighten out 1,000 problems in your kingdoms. Again, he sent other servants, more in number than the first time, but they did the same thing to them. So he kept sending these prophets to them, see. As Yahshua said, he sent prophets to them. Which of the prophets have your fathers not persecuted? That's the same thing he's pointing out here. This is the kingdom of Yahweh now, with Satan's influence on one side, Yahweh's words of the prophets, which he said you can trust these now. You can trust these. This is someone I sent. Go to the lost tribes of the house of Yahweh, of the lost tribes of the house of Israel, and take this message to them. Don't worry about whether they repent or not. That's not what I'm telling you to do. Go there and teach it. Whether they repent or whether they don't, we're warning them of this. And you're telling them what's going to take place thereafter. And each time Yahweh would do this, he would do it with kings and so forth, and the prophet would actually have the power to tell this king what was going to take place in his life. They should have said, hey, we need to get back to Yahweh here. The gods can't do this. And that's what was told to each prophet. Tell them Yahweh says this. Your gods are worthless. The gods that you're following are worthless. That's what he says of me also, and my brother Jacob, who is the other witness. He said, this knowledge is going to be given to you. You know, no one else in the world teaches this but us. No one. That the gods are worthless, they can't foretell anything, but Yahweh lays it out. He lays it out in the prophecies by the prophets. He lays it out in detail, in writing. He can't even go back. He said, no, I didn't say that. Remember what the Pope says, or the Pope makes a statement and then the Vatican comes behind him and says, oh, he didn't mean that. Trump has the same thing going on. He didn't mean pig blood. He meant watercolors or something. Therefore, or then, the verse 37, then last of all, he sent his son to them, Yahshua Messiah. They will reverence my son. That should be, if you wanted to change it or put a note there, some will reverence my son. Some will reverence my son. But when the tenants saw the son, they said among themselves, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him. And notice this closely, what he's saying now. This is Satan's influence, and he's saying we can take this kingdom of Yahweh by force. You see that? This is Satan's scheme. Satan is allowed to influence, to inspire mankind. Remember Yochanan 8:44? He says your father, your teacher is Satan the devil, and what she tells you to do, because you've become a servant of hers, you're in bondage to this sin. She owns you, and whatever she tells you to do, you're going to do it. That's the influence she has over the world right now. How did you think the world got in such a stupid mess? Mankind don't have sense enough to get it in this bigger mess. This is a perfect mess created. It's perfect destruction set up for mankind. There's no way that mankind could have planned this himself without the influence of some higher power. There is no way you could be sitting here in this kingdom of Yahweh right now without it being planned, and that's what we've been trying to show in this for weeks and weeks and weeks. Without it being planned, every move of it being planned by Yahweh. Every bit of it, every act that I have done and didn't even realize it. Yahweh said, though you didn't realize it was me. He tells us that. Even the books, the first books I wrote, the mark of the beast that Kohan Yedidia keeps telling the people, you know, you really need to read those books. We're finding it in the numbers now that this was actually shown. Every bit of this is shown in the numbers and the gematria of the lessons that I gave in those two books. Well, here we see her plan now. If you'll just look at that closely, these people are influenced to think that they can actually overpower Yahweh and take this kingdom. This is a mighty kingdom in heaven, and they can take it by force. Now, if you just reason, do a little bit of reasoning, Yahweh forecast every move that we've made. He's forecast every move from Genesis clear down to now. Satan could not touch it. It went just exactly along with what Yahweh said it would. Starting with Genesis 1, just the way he said it, he had a work, and he kept that work alive. And then after the second flood, he kept his work alive, but he said, now nothing is going to be restrained from them from this point on. That is, restrained from Satan and her influence and their schemes to rule the world. His lesson will never be forgotten, because he gives mankind he allows mankind to be influenced by Satan and to go ahead and build his kingdom of force clear up to the very end, where he increases knowledge. Now that increase of knowledge is going to come to you. That's what it's promised. It's going to become to you who are in unity with Yahweh. You're going to receive this knowledge that Satan had to begin with, but she lost it. When she lost control of the microorganisms, she lost control of being able to create and maintain flesh. Even her own self is dying right now. You'll have the power of life, the tree of life. You are the tree of life right now. Yes, you are. And you're going to have that power to give to others when this job is finished. When this job was started, there was no gods beside Yahweh. No gods. Neither will there be a God after his creation is finished. And you're the finishing touch on that, and there won't be any gods after the specified time period, which is right after the millennium. 100 years after the millennium. Then that's the point, too, where Satan herself dies. Right after the millennium. Now, she's got to know this. If not, I'm glad I told her. Let us seize his inheritance by force, see? By force and violence, like they did the temple. By force and violence, they're going to receive it. They want to receive it. They caught him, cast him out of the vineyard, and killed him. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, well, he asked the question, what would you think? And they said, well, he'd destroy them with a vicious, well, let's read it on. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants? They said to him, not you, Yahshua, he will destroy those men with a miserable death and will lease out the vineyard to other tenants who will give him the fruits in due season. Now look at what Yahshua points out. This prophecy right here is pointed out. Of course, and Yahshua kept pointing out prophecies. I don't know if they understood it, but he kept saying, look, this is a fulfillment of prophecy. And how could this be? He told you what was going to be. Why won't you believe him? Yahshua said to them, have you never read in the scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected has become the headstone of the corner? This right here shows that Yahweh is in control of his plan. You see that? This would have been the very first thing that that Satan and the gods would have stopped had they could, if they were able to stop it. They're not able to stop it. They're still thinking they're going to destroy the earth and the heavens that involve the earth, and therefore take the kingdom of heaven back. He has become the headstone of the corner. There's a lot of scriptures go with that, like Matthew 16:18. On this unity I will build my house. Hebrews 10:21. I'll be high priest over the house of Yahweh. That house I'm building, going to be done in unity. Zechariah 6:11-13, working with the donkeys. This is how this house, this kingdom, is going to come to unity and perfection, and is coming to unity. The rejoicing I see here, brethren, at the house of Yahweh, I've never seen it before anywhere in my life. Headstone of the corner. Now, this is Yahweh's doing. This is Yahweh's doing. It's prophesied, nothing left out. It's not like he spoke it in secret. It's written for you to read. It is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore I say unto you, the kingdom of Yahweh will be taken from you. Well, he's talking about, of course, mankind now here, that was set up by Moshe. The laws of life was given to them. And, of course, Yahweh was prophesied to be ruler. Yahweh still is ruler. And they're admitting that, the Catholic Church. They're admitting the keys of this blood, Malachi Martin. Yahweh is the ruler. His religion, your brothers will worship you. Your brothers will praise you, Yahweh. That's a religion that they're following. Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of Yahweh will be taken from you and given to a people of the same habit, but from a foreign land, and they will bring forth the fruits of it. We're that kingdom, brethren, right now. In the last days, I will establish my house. That is Yahshua's house, based on, the foundation is unity. Unity with Yahshua, unity with the 12 disciples, unity with Yahshua, unity with the prophets of Yahweh that foretold all of this. And whoever falls on this stone will be broken, and whomever it falls, it will ground him to powder. And speaking of the ashes under the feet of those who reverence my name, that's in Malachi 4:1-4. Now verse 45. Now when the chief priests and the Pharisees had heard this, you see who he is speaking to? Chief priests and the Pharisees heard this. They perceived that they knew he spoke of them. They knew this, but they wouldn't repent. But when they sought to lay hands on him, this shows their force, taught by the Nimrod school created, fathered by Cush. A kingdom of force. That's what Satan taught Cain. All the world has gone the way of Cain. But when they sought to lay hands on him, they feared the multitudes who came to see miracles, who came to get fed from a few fish that fed 5,000 or 7,000. He had power with the microorganisms because they regarded him as a prophet. So they feared. That's the only thing that didn't stop him. Look at, with all of that in your mind, turn over to Isaiah 14, and you'll see the inspiration here, the character that Satan used not only on mankind, but she used it in heaven. And she won a lot of people, a lot of beings over to her. 1/3, it doesn't give us the number. I don't think it's countable. But there's got to be trillions of beings, as many planets as there are, that we've already discovered. It doesn't seem like there's any end to the universe. But here in Isaiah now, 14, now imagine these two kingdoms here. And Yahweh having created them, Yahweh having put laws out to guide them. Yes, they had these laws. The universe has these laws of Yahweh, the perfect way of life, but they rejected them, and they said, well, I'm smarter than Yahweh, we'll go our own way. Well, that won't go in this next kingdom. and you're going to understand why. You should understand it now. This news, I don't see how it could get any worse, but it's going to get worse. Believe it or not, it's going to get worse. The cruelty that we see that was just shown in this news, it just tears your heart out when you have to watch that and know it's taking place right now in this generation, just like Yahweh said it would. And where is it taking place? In that fourth part of the earth, in and around the great river Euphrates. I'm putting this in a letter, by the way, with a map where you can see, and every nation there is listed in that fourth part of the earth is having trouble at this time. Well, here now in chapter 14 of Isaiah, verse 12, Yahweh shows how Satan fell, how she went under, like Babylon, which was created by Cush with the school of Nimrod, this great confusion that is taking place, that has been building now for 6,000 years, remember. And Daniel said in chapter 8, he said, in the end of their days, or in the last days, when sin has reached its peak. Well, you're seeing that peak right now, when sin. And to get that done now, Satan's kingdom used Yada to get rid of the book of Yahweh, move the temple to Rome, move the house of Yahweh to Rome, take the book of Yahweh to Rome, hide it for 1,500 years so the laws could not be read, because as long as the laws are read, the people, like the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians, kept having trouble. And what was taught to them by Satan and influenced by Satan was kill all of your enemies. Kill all of your enemies. Well, their enemies was the ones that said, it's not right for you to take your brother's wife. It's a wonder the brother had not killed him. Well, the brother tried to kill him, but he was killed himself by the soldiers that guarded him. The Roman legend, the Roman legion was a huge army. That's not the Roman army. The Roman army, 30,000 of them surrounded Jerusalem. 30,000 at one time. 30,000. The Roman legion was much smaller than that. They didn't need that many. They could call on the whole Roman army anytime they wanted to, but they're the ones that guarded the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians. Yes, they had bodyguards, many of them. These were the well-trained loyal. They had to be very loyal. And if they found someone that wasn't loyal, they got rid of him. In verse 12, how have you fallen from heaven, O Satan, O Lucifer, child of light? Now, this gives you the power that Satan had. This light here is the same light that is promised us. It's knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. How you are cut down to the ground. Why was you taken out of heaven? Why were you dismissed from heaven? Why is there no place in heaven left for you now? The heavenly courts ruled this. They saw what she was doing because Yahweh is making it known to them. He's playing it out right in front of them. So she has fallen to earth, and she's saying that she has got to get this straightened out in 10 years. She's given 10 extra years. Now, whatever time that started, how you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations. You weakened the nations with your teaching of hatred, of breaking the commandments, stealing, murdering. Of course that weakens the nations. It weakens any empire when you get these things to going in it. And she rejected that, and all of her preachers do what she tells them to do. So they teach this to the nations. Get rid of the 10 Commandments. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend above the heavens. I will raise my throne. This means she had a throne. Right? Do you see that? I will raise my throne. This woman sat upon a throne. What is a throne? The chair of seat of a sovereign or high dignitary as a bishop. As a bishop. Many of you are bishops right now and don't know it because you're classified as a bishop. The seat of a deity. This is the seat of a god. This is the throne that Satan had. The seat of a god. Royal power and dignity. That is respect. Sovereignty. Her word was no one could disobey. That's the same thing she gave to her followers. Constantine, when he says, this is the God you're going to worship, that man had power that when someone didn't obey him, he was dead. He may as well tie the knots right then because they'd kill him. And they'd find a way to do so. Order or angel. Now that is hierarchy. That was her throne. A bishop. You hear that word a lot in the Catholic Church, but those people are not bishops, except under Satan. She gives them that authority, but that takes away what a bishop really is. A bishop, one having spiritual or celestial supervision. Supervision as an angel or angelic, Eastern Orthodox or Roman Catholic clergyman, ranking above a priest, having authority to ordain and confirm and typically governing a diocese. Any of various Protestant clerical officials who superintend other clergy, a Mormon high priest, these are Satan's offices, over a word or over all other bishops, and over the Aaronic. Do you get this? Get this now. I put it in writing long before they put it in there. Long before they would tell you. Over the Aaronic priesthood. Over the Aaronic priesthood. Now back to Isaiah 14. I will raise my throne above the stars of Yahweh. I will sit in the highest place. I am going to ascend. I'm going to take. He's going to get rid of Yahweh's throne. This is what she's saying. She thinks she has the power because 1/3 of the dignitaries, the bishops in heaven, followed her. 1/3 of them. These were high-ranking officers. Many of them her own children. In fact, her children are mentioned in the same chapter and in Yakiska. I will sit in the highest place. on the holy mountain of the congregation. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High is at this time. She's going to take his place, is what she is wanting to do, and this is what she's putting in the minds of the religions today who reject Yahweh's laws. She's lining them up to try to destroy mankind and the earth and the planets that involve the earth. And Yahshua said, unless she can do that, he actually talks about this. Yahshua actually talks about this and said if she's able to do that, that's the only thing that's going to keep the kingdom of Yahweh and every law of Yahweh from going to the universe and being ruled forever, taught and guided forever. Is this the one? People are going to see this. They're going to say, is this the one who made the world a wilderness? Now, Yahweh is going to allow her to do that. He shows that. The great burning is going to take place. But the great burning is going to take place, yes. But Yahweh says in the last days he's going to establish his house. He's established his house. She tried to destroy his house and couldn't. Remember? Everyone should remember that. But you are cast out of your grave like an abominable branch. Look down to verse 20. You will not be joined with them in burial because you have destroyed your land and slaughtered your people. The seed of the evildoers will never be mentioned again. Well, if you read Malachi 4, he says that the wicked will be ashes under the feet of those who reverence Yahweh. Those who reverence Yahweh, remember what the word reverence is. I think I spent about 20 sermons trying to make clearer the word reverence at one time. It means those who keep Yahweh's laws, who are in unity with Yahweh, who practice being in unity with Yahweh and put down their own self. Yes, actually put yourself down and be in unity with Yahweh. Yahshua even said, if you go out on your own, you're going to be condemned. If you go out on your own, you've got to be part of the body. The body is the house of Yahweh, established in these last days in perfect unity, as Yahshua said. Prepare slaughter for her children. Her children. Now this changes now from mankind to her children, the gods, who appeared with her before Yahweh in heaven. Remember Eob? Prepare slaughter for her children because of the iniquity of their fathers, so that they may not rise, possess the earth, and fill the face of the world with cities. For I will raise up against them, says Yahweh of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant and offspring and descendants, says Yahweh. Well, this is his word now in black and white. Look at verse 24. This is Yahweh calling her hand and saying this is the way it's going to be. And his word comes to pass. His prophecies come to pass. Every one of them. She's never been able to change it. Yahweh of hosts has vowed, saying, just as surely as I have planned, so will it come to pass. Just as surely as I have purposed, so will it stand. Look at verse 26. This is the purpose plan that is prophesied upon the whole earth. This is the hand. This is it. This is the way it's going to be. This is the hand that is stretched out upon all the nations. Look at verse 29. Do not rejoice, all of you Philistines, because the rod of him that struck you, because the rod of him who struck you has broken, For out of the serpent's root will come forth an adder, and his offspring will be a fiery flying serpent. Telling you about the nuclear bombs that's actually going to destroy the sinners. The sinners are actually going to destroy themselves. The sinners will be destroyed by the sinners. Yahweh is not going to do it. They're going to destroy themselves. The kingdom, brethren, is not very far away. The wars, as you can see, are getting everything on earth is just getting crazy, and they're even calling it themselves crazy, but they don't know what to do about it. They're using cars now to kill people. They were using guns. They're using cars. I suspect that the next thing we will see is roadblocks, checkpoints here and there to try to, well, this is what was set up in Israel to do the same thing, because they had the same thing taking place in Israel. And now you have to go through several checkpoints. In fact, when we went into Gaza, we sat at a checkpoint, seemed to me like about 3 hours, wasn't it? Man, waiting to get through. And the people that was with us, who are actually residents of Israel and working with us, they were getting pretty loud at one time and even screaming back and forth. We did get through, and we went down to see the dignitaries there and got our job done. We witnessed to them and told them exactly how it was going to be. If they remember, and I think they will, the word travels from mouth to mouth, like the gossiping woman that Yahshua spoke to. It's all right to gossip if you gossip now about righteousness. But the Samaritan woman, Nora, and of course we got our job done throughout Israel. We visited every nation that I know of. I think we did. I think we covered every nation that had an office in Israel. Most of them do. Most every nation has an office there. Even the Americans, which we also talked to them too, and showed them what was going to take place in the coming years. We also visited the teachers. Now this was a assembly of teachers that they all came together to hear us present Yahweh's program. They all, except one, I think. I thought there was one that was hesitant about it, but they were all in unity except that one. The one asked questions sarcastically, but she was the only one. The rest of them wanted the peaceful solution, character education taught throughout Israel, and they were willing to work with us to do it. Now, so we know that it's acceptable there by some and being talked about by them. So that word is spread. There is a peaceful solution, and it's offered by the House of Yahweh. Now that is in Israel at this time. If the dignitaries carried this back to their countries, those who hold seats in Israel, then that spread too. Not as exact as you would get it from the House of Yahweh, but now that there's computers and you can push a button and pull up the information from the House of Yahweh, and you can get it in several different ways. You can get answers to all questions. And I'm being told now that when people ask questions, that most of the time to answer this, they refer them to the House of Yahweh. So you know, Yahweh is building, he's building this reach out program, this kingdom, and he's reaching the people. There's no stopping it. Yahweh said the gates of hell is not going to prevail against it this time. But Yahweh, at the same time Satan is working to try to destroy the world, Yahweh is working to save a remnant. A remnant. That's what you're doing right now. Your money, your tithe, your offerings, and so forth, is not only feeding the poor here, but it's feeding the world the message. The poor will have the message preached to them. I don't care if you're a refugee or whatever, it's going out to the world, and it's free. May Yahweh bless your understanding. I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you.
Y'all please raise your hands, Father Yahweh. Our Father who is in heaven, whose name is Yahweh, this is your servant, Ignorant Buffalo Hawkins, coming to you. And you to the body of priests, through my head, Pastor and overseer, the great Yisrayl Hawkins, who is under the authority of the great high priest, Yahshua Messiah, our soon coming King. Thank you for the services today, and please help us to retain all the knowledge from the rest of the classes today. And please bless the rest of the classes that will be going on today. Please heal those who are skin afflicted at this time. Please release Candidia from prison and all those who is teaching the peaceful solution. Please bless the food, the drink, the water, and the air that we are about to partake of, and please help it to be nourishing and sustaining. Please remove all the impurities from it. Please bless the rest of this day, and please help us to be a delight to others on the Sabbath. Please bless Pastor with the full use of the conscious mind and connection with you, and safety and protection. Keep the work going. And please help us to develop your perfect and righteous character. Please bless the works of our hands and allow them to be successful. And you to the body of priests, through my head, Pastor and overseer, the great Yisrayl Abel.